So this session, there's a group of us who had a few different experiences with teaching with special collections over the last year. And I'm sure all of you did as well, and problems that you had and things that worked really well. And so hopefully the session will be a time to share some good stuff that happened, some of the kind of constraints and barriers that were maybe overcome or maybe overcame us, and share some of those ideas. So none of us are, I hope you all agree, presenters, none of us are experts in this thing. We've found our way through this, and we're looking forward to hearing more from all of you who are here as well about it. So it's our little Southwest group that's kind of coordinated this. And let's see. So we've got a bunch of talks, very short talks. So we've got Doreen, who's going to be talking about object analysis, Helen, who's talking about special skills for special collections, Brett and Jackie talking about artist books online. I'll be talking about the Zine Making workshop we ran at UE. And then Ludo and Sarah will be talking about using zines for reflection. So we'll have some presentations and then hopefully have lots of time at the second half of the session for discussion. And we're just going to wing that and see how it goes. And there's kind of potentially quite a lot of people on this call. So we'll just use the chat and invite you to put your hands up and talk if you want to do that. And we'll just see where we get to with it. So that's the plan. So I shall hand over to Doreen first for her presentation.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Morwenna. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so here we are. At Cardiff Met, we have archives and special collections in the library. And within that, some of the most used materials are the artists' books. So I'd like to share with you how we've used our experiences of shifting face-to-face student workshops to online sessions, where we've tried to enable students to experience and learn about objects from the collection, albeit through a computer screen. Our collection's been built over about 10 years, and we now have over 600 artists' books. We have 2 discrete rooms off the main lending library, one for archival storage and the other this small teaching room with the browsable artist books collection that you can see here. With so many books to choose from, we can tailor workshops to the context of the teaching module. This particular workshop was for a group of students who were about to travel to Marrakesh. One of the outcomes from their travels was to produce a book inspired and informed by their experiences. So we focused on sharing with them books relating to travel documentation and a sense of place. Another project is Printed Matter. It's a 5-week project offered to level 5 students from all disciplines. An artist's books project covering the genre and its history through a variety of means. It culminates in each student making a finished edition, and the edition size can be anything from 3 books up to 500. And library involvement and support in research skills is embedded in this, and our information and the resources are included in the module information on Moodle. Here's part of the project brief, and as you'll see, it has a solid emphasis on research. As part of their research, students would normally have come into the workshop in the library to explore a range of artists' books. We had noticed that in the enthusiasm to see all that we could show them, sometimes students would just skim through all the books or focus on the structure used without necessarily understanding the content or the concept and the relationship of that to the format or book structure. We decided with the lecturer to do more than a simple browsing session, to have more structure and to start the process of critically analysing an object as an introduction to the more in-depth case study the students would do in their project. Given the room size, the cohort of 25 was split and we ran 2 sessions. Students were grouped into 2s or 3s, with each small group being given one wrapped book, thus eliminating the element of choice, for example, picking a book they liked or may have been familiar with. And the task was, in your group, explore your given book so that you can then describe it to the whole group. Use these prompts to help gather your results. Groups were also asked to note any further observations or interpretations. For example, why the artist may have used a particular text or image or a format and so on, or how effective the process or the materials used were. Each group then had 5 to 10 minutes to describe their book to the whole group, and I could backfill with additional information, such as the context, the social issues, historical context, and so on. So information that might have been trickier to find in the time allowed. So some of the outcomes from this: the group as a whole learned about 6 or 7 books in depth. They could observe others' ways of analysing and describing an object, and also ways of presenting. It opened up a way of engaging with and researching a book that offered a process to use to begin their case study that they were to do later in the project. We realised that we could run a similar exercise to the one I've described, an object analysis and research activity, but online. So how did we convert it to a remote activity? Initially, I delivered a talk online to the whole group to familiarise them with our collection and the range of books in it, and also ways of finding these on our catalogue MetSearch. We then split the groups into 4 groups of 5 using Teams channels. Just to mention that the lecturer decided on the group makeup. These students were from different disciplines and didn't necessarily know each other or weren't familiar with working together. Each group was given a title for one book selected from our collection, along with a research template similar to what we'd used before. They were asked to start with the library catalogue MetSearch, and when they were researching, I channel hopped to make sure each group was on track and to give them any advice or prompts. The lecturer suggested some titles we might use, and we made sure we selected books that we knew had content that was out there. We wanted to build in success. As for timing, we could play with this. Rather than the limit of 10 minutes from the on-site workshop, we decided to set the task and then reconvene 2 hours later for a feedback session, allowing plenty of time to explore in depth, to work as a team, and to decide how to record what they'd found and where, and how to present their findings. Most groups used the chat facility on their Teams channel to pool their research, images, websites, video clips, and so on. And for feedback, groups chose to present their research through PowerPoint or InDesign. Results were in the main extensive and comprehensive. As before, I'd prepared my own research into the same titles and shared further links, but in general, the students had managed to find an impressive amount of information and had become well informed. We also recorded the feedback so students could watch again, or some who couldn't attend could pick up on this later. So how did the students find this exercise? At the end of the module, as well as opening an Instagram page featuring and selling their work, each student presented to the whole cohort, their lecturer and me. They described their research and process of developing their final edition. By being able to sit in on the final presentations, not something I'd done on site, I could hear from many of them how books from our collection had inspired them and how the research process had given them a structure to use to explore other works and also to inform and reflect on their own work. So how did the 2 activities compare? Well, the upside, we could reach a larger group. We weren't limited by room size. And the timing allowed for more in-depth research. Sessions were recorded for any who couldn't attend, and there was improved access and participation for some. Students could work around their working hours and childcare. On the downside, the most obvious is not being able to touch the book, losing that haptic sensation, the touch, the feel, how they move, how the book functions, even the smell or the weight of it. In terms of participation, if videos are turned off and the students are muted, it can be a bit soulless. But the other side is you can't guarantee that there is participation. and for some, internet connections were patchy. We also have a rich collection of reference books in the special collections, books about books, and they couldn't be accessed because they're reference only. So what next? We've just invested in a visualizer and hope that across the summer we can make short videos of us handling the books to bring them to life. There are many more videos of work and videos of artists talking about their work in the public domain now, so we can link to this. And a thank you to Yui for much of that work that's gone on. We've gained experience using a range of teaching methods and have shared and learnt from others too. So we're preparing to be agile so that we can respond to whatever circumstances we face next term and aim to bring these books and objects to life through the screen and to give access for students wherever they are. And you have my contact details here, and I'll be available for the chat later on if you have any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen now and hand over to Helen Rayner.
Thank you very much, Doreen. I will share my screen now. And hoping that that's showing full screen. So, special skills for special collections. This is very much a bus-bar experience, but you might recognise some of our issues yourselves. So firstly, I'll describe our special collections at Bar University very quickly. Talk about our pre-COVID teaching, the changes that we needed to put in place when COVID struck, and further improvements that we need to make. So, special collections at Bar University, there are 15 separate special collections, but only 6 of those are ones that subject librarians regularly teach with. So there's the artist book collection. We have nearly 400 items now. The art and design special collection, which came to us from Bath Academy of Art at Corsham Court. It's mostly 19th and early 20th century books, but we do have some earlier items. Early printed books. The oldest is a Bible from 1549. The Ladevese collection. Jack Ladevese donates copies of the books that have won the V&A Illustration Awards each year. So those are built up quite a bit over time. The alumni collection is a collection of first editions written by Bar alumni, and they're all signed copies. And also the art and design poster collection. So this is a collection of posters for degree shows that were created by students. So pre-COVID teaching, we had handling sessions for items in the special collection. They allowed close scrutiny of the items, discussion of their relevance, and obviously an opportunity to ask questions. And it wasn't just art and design courses, English literature, children's publishing, and others were involved as well. So just as an example, MA Children's Publishing, Katie Rickard, the librarian at Corsham Court, and I agreed that we needed something that engaged the students' critical thinking more effectively than just showing them the books. So we set up an activity within the session where groups of 3 students investigated a book, filled out a worksheet, and then shared their findings with the class. In exploring book, we asked them what their response was to it as well, and what knowledge or experience they could bring to bear. And their research, well, we provided notes for them once they'd done that first worksheet, and then they had time to reflect. And despite good feedback from the students, we knew that we had more improvements to make. We felt that perhaps we should stop spoon feeding with the notes and actually trust the students to do research using reliable sources, starting with the library catalogue and going further. We also wondered about the possibility of assessed exercises with tutors. But then COVID struck. So we had to make rapid changes and develop our own special skills. So these are just some examples from the last year. We saw students from photography, MA English Literature, and creative arts practice, to name just three. We, first of all, with the photography students, we did a demonstration to a laptop camera. This was because I had grabbed some artist books as we left the library and then just showed them to the camera. Not all that satisfactory, but it was better than nothing. And also it was via Google Meet. That was what the tutors requested initially. English Literature MA session was led by Katie Rickard, and she demonstrated using a phone camera set into a gooseneck stand, and that was Google Meet as well. And then I did the same for creative arts practice, although I used an iPad camera. I have to say that for those sessions, the activities and the tasks that we built in went out of the window. We were so intent on getting the tech right. So the changes and what we learned. Well, we learned a lot from webinars and the generous sharing of experience in-house with our own colleagues and also worldwide. We also learned that it's really important to always practice your sessions beforehand. We learned that the laptop camera really should be used only as a last resort. You can see as in a photograph at the top there that I'm showing a journal to the camera, and that was really difficult. I really needed 4 hands, which weren't available. Google Meet we found wasn't helpful when recording the sessions. It was fine when students were watching, but the actual recordings followed the sound. So that meant that sometimes the visuals flipped to a different view. You can see in the bottom example, we get a side view rather than the one that I was hoping for from the iPad in the stand, which gave an overview from above. So the recording offered by our VLE, which is Blackboard Collaborate, is much more reliable, and we will be advising tutors to use this for future sessions. We also realised that we needed a better quality camera, and we invested in a visualizer, as Doreen suggested. So other visualizers are available, and we're still to fully explore this, although Katie has done some really good work with recording and using the zooming in and out features of this particular visualizer. It's nice and sturdy, and so we don't get the shake, the camera shake that we were getting before as well. So further improvements, well, we're building in more interaction now. So we're putting the tasks back into the sessions, and we still think that we can do the select, explore, research and reflect. We can show students books and then they can select one of those. They can still do the exploring and the researching and then come back to us with their findings. And we've drawn on breakout room experience from other sessions that we've held. So using the whiteboard, Google Docs or Jamboard to create a live and lasting record of the student contributions. So in conclusion, at Bath University, we've certainly acquired new special skills ourselves for sharing and promoting special collections with the help of our colleagues and the inspiration of our peers at other institutions, and we're definitely still learning. Thank you. I'll stop sharing. And I'm going to hand over to our next speakers, who are Brett Moody and Jackie King from UWE.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm just going to share my screen.
Hi everyone, thanks Helen.
Hi, yes, thank you. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep,
okay. So, yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Brett. So, Brett and I, we're subject librarians at UWE's City campus, supporting art and design students at our Barashton, Arnolfini and Spike Island campuses. And those students include fine art and graphic design students. In this short presentation, we're just going to give you a brief overview of the Artist Books workshops we've been running for the last few years. For these students, as well as our experience this year of trying to pivot these online and trying to deliver something to carry on inspiring students, but in an online version of the workshops. So I just move on to the first slide. So I'm going to start with just a very quick overview of what we've actually been doing the last few years. We began delivering Artist Books workshops a few years ago, and this came about after a request from a graphic design lecturer for what was basically a show and tell session where we brought along some artist books to show the students at our Arnolfini campus. So this really involved, bringing a pile of books, artist books, and laying them out on the table, talking briefly about the collection and allowing the students to get hands-on and explore the books. Word got around after the session, and then we had some requests from illustration and fine art lecturers as well to do the same thing. And over the years, the sessions have evolved from simply bringing along some books and laying them out on the table to something which has become much more structured. And these workshops have three main aims. The first one, obviously, is to introduce the students to artist books and also to our special collections at Barashton, and ultimately to encourage them to find inspiration from browsing the collection and start to create their own artist books. The second aim was to use this as an opportunity to help the students with their research skills. So we would show them how to research books about artist books, how to access the subject databases, and also sharing useful links with them to encourage them to do further research. And then the last aim was to introduce the students to the idea of, artist books communities and events happening around them, in particular the Artist Book Club at UWE, and also the annual event that had been, until recently, been taking place regularly at Arnolfini, Bristo's Artist Book event, otherwise known as BABE. So that's what we have been doing. So just a little bit now about how we actually delivered them. So we would bring along a snapshot of the collection into the teaching space, allow the students to handle these. We would select artist books according to as many different formats and different content types as we could. Sorry, just go back a slide. On this slide here, this is just one of our concertina books that we have in our collection. So this is the kind of thing that we would try and bring along with us. And then we would end with a tour of the special collections area. And because our fine art students and graphic design students are based at different campuses from the library, this was a really good opportunity to get across to the library at Barashton as well and get to know the collection well. We would emphasise to the students the special nature of our collection, because this collection began back in the 1970s as a teaching collection and is always designed to be handled and act as a study resource for the students and staff. And in normal times, i.e. pre-COVID, students and staff can access the collection anytime within the library. They're reference only, but we would have our cabinets open and they'd be able to go in and access them whenever they wanted to without having to ask us to do that. And in 2020, we introduced an activity to try and sort of improve what we've been doing so far, and to get to encourage the students to reflect more about how artist books could be useful for their practice. So we introduced an activity where in the library, after browsing, we would ask them to select 2 items from the collection, and then we'd have a discussion about why they chose them and how they might want to use them in their own practice to encourage that reflection. So flashing forwards to 2021 and our challenge of delivering artist books online, I was asked by a graphic design lecturer to do an artist book session. And while I was pondering this, we were then asked by a fine art lecturer as well. I knew this was going to be a difficult task to transfer these online, but the lecturers had specific reasons they wanted the students to do these. Namely, they wanted the students to create artist books for a number of different exhibitions over the summer. So we were determined to do something. We had 2 weeks notice to do this as well. So our dilemma was, how do we engage students with a collection which currently wasn't accessible due to COVID? And how do we create a substitute for the hands-on experience of handling the artist books and browsing the collection for inspiration? So I'm going to hand over now to Brett, who's going to talk a little bit about how this went.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so we decided that the central part of these workshops was really handling the physical objects and looking at the collection, interacting with it physically. So as we couldn't do that, we decided that the next best thing was actually to show the physical items on the screen in the sessions, on the online sessions. So because I was still going into campus on an infrequent basis, I made sure I grabbed a bunch of quite easy to carry artist books and brought them home to show on screen, particularly the concertina books like the one in the previous slides. And just to give an idea of the different designs of these artist books and to, show them in a bit more tactile way. It had a limited success, I'd say, but it was better than not doing it at all. So yeah, and instead of the hands-on activity that we used to incorporate into the sessions, we located a video about an artist books collection and got the students to respond to certain questions about the video, and again reflect on how they could relate it to their practice. So that also had limited success. The students were quite into it, but at the same time, not to the same level as they would be in the physical classroom. But it did break up the session nicely and was interactive and gave the semblance of a practical activity. So we also had really great interactivity from the lecturers in both graphic design and fine art. The lecturers were attending the sessions and interjecting with anecdotes and details about various artist books, which is really, really crucial to engaging the students and kind of elevated it from just a general talk about the collection. So in terms of takeaways from this session, so just the next slide, please. Thank you. So it went better than expected. I mean, we were doubting that this would really be that possible, but when we put it together and came up with the activity, it seemed to go pretty well. Again, the participation from the lecturer really helped elevate that, and having a bit of interaction with the interactive activities in terms of the video activity, but also showing the books on screen, I think kind of elevated it slightly from a general online teaching session. But we did realize that interaction with the collection is crucial, and so this kind of led us to really prioritize a way for students and staff to be able to access the collection. So we had had to develop quite detailed process for this, but we're able to come up with a service called Request and View, because these are reference items, obviously. We created a way where students and staff could look on the library catalogue and select books. We would put them aside for them, and then they could come in and view the items in the library, and then we would ensure that the items were, put away, quarantined, the space was cleaned afterwards and sanitized. And then we also realized that some students and staff might not know what they're looking for, so we came up with another way where they could browse the entire special collections area. This is a little bit more complex because we needed to ensure that the entire collection was quarantined for 72 hours afterwards. So we gave the two options of a Thursday or a Friday morning, and that meant that the collections could be quarantined over the weekend as part of it. And yeah, we've had some uptake of this, which is great, but just having that option to interact with the collection, I think, is really essential. And it'd be interesting to know in the discussion what your libraries have done to address this. Thank you. Yeah, that's the end of our presentation, and I'm going to hand you over to Morwenna now.
Thank you. I shall just try and share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I'll just rely on someone shouting if they can't. So I'm going to talk briefly about the zines workshop that we ran at UWE. So this was a 45-minute workshop which we originally designed last October as a drop-in online workshop in what UWE called Block Zero. So it had 3 or 4 weeks of kind of induction activities, so for both new and also returning students. So there were program related kind of inductions and teaching, and also wider university sessions as well. So that's what this workshop was about. But it was open to all students across the whole university, not just from our art and design campus. And we did have lots of people from different disciplines and different campuses joining the session as well. So it was a kind of optional session that people could book into and attend. And the point of it was, I guess there were several things really. One was just a little bit about zines and the kind of welcoming kind of session for new students. Secondly, it was about promoting our collections, because at that point people couldn't access our special collections. So Brett's just mentioned we've now got a process to access things, but at that point we didn't. And also thirdly, kind of like a mindful creative kind of activity, because we did some making as part of the session. So these are a selection of the slides that we used. These were all designed by Sean Oaten, and hopefully give you a glimpse of it, but there were many more slides. So we started with establishing what a zine was and getting feedback from the students as to what they understood from it and whether they were aware of zines before. And all the workshops we ran had a lot of engagement and interaction from students. I guess when people kind of choose to attend a session, you typically have that more than something that's mandatory, but we had some really lively conversations and people who were sharing their own knowledge and involvement and whether they made zines and how they've used them. So we kind of covered that. We gave a brief history of the development of zines. So we kind of had slides a bit like this, going from 30s up to the present day, with just very brief information about the history of zines, essentially, and kind of some examples from each of those decades. We also signposted various resources and things that we thought people might find interesting. So this one from Austin Cleon and his little zines he used to put in his son's lunchbox and send him to school with them. And again, people would share some tips and other kind of resources or their favourite artists or favourite zines in the chat, or putting their mics on as well. So that was really, all the sessions were really rewarding actually for everybody, I think. And like I say, we promoted our zine collections. So we talked about what we had in the library, we talked about our exhibitions, and our collection of zines is very much quite a organic collection, let's say. So it's kind of been built up by people who've collected them individually. So a kind of ex-colleague of ours mainly kind of collected quite a lot at zine fairs and art shows and things like that. So it's quite an eclectic collection. And we were trying to also say to the students that we really wanted to see their work, and if they wanted to donate their work to the library collection, then we'd be really happy to have copies. And some of our students create zines as part of their modules as well. So that was another thing to kind of promote what we had and encourage them to kind of engage with the collections when they could. And then we talked, had a kind of discussion about why people might want to make a zine. So as I say, there were people who came from all different disciplines, not just from the creative subjects. So we kind of got their ideas about how they could use zines in their work, and talked about examples of students who'd used zines as kind of CVs, for instance, or to kind of build their audience. And that was a really, engaging kind of conversation that we had with all the different groups. So that was kind of the first half of the session. So what zines were, what our collections had in them, and why they might be of interest to students. And then the second half of the session was about making. So we had 45-minute session in total, and about a 15-minute section for people to make a zine. So when people booked onto the workshop, they were also invited to follow a link to a kind of closed YouTube channel, which had a video on it about how to make a no staple zine in preparation for the session. But there was no expectation, and we showed the video again in the session. So I'm going to show you that in a second. So yeah, we had a 15-minute session, which is always far too short, where Sean and I kind of kept our cameras on and were, drawing while everyone else could have their cameras off if they want to, and just spend some, I don't know, mindful time kind of drawing or writing, or whatever they wanted to do. So I'll show you that in a second. And we asked them to put their a screenshot onto a Padlet. So I'm going to just escape out of here and show you that Padlet and show you an example of it. So so we had various videos that we put. So this Padlet has expanded, and it continues to expand with every time we run this session. And I'll mention different ways we've run it in a moment. But you could, or students could obviously kind of link through to that video. So a 2-minute video about how to make a no staple zine, can pause it and replay it, etc. So like I say, we kind of asked them to do that before the session, but we also showed the session, this video within the session as well. The other thing that we did was, and it's interesting to hear about these talks about how people were actually showing the physical items. Another thing that we did was we contacted mostly ex-students, I think, whose zines we have in our collection, and we asked them for permission to make a flick-through video like this. So we made a handful of videos like this, just as a way of very, very second best to actually touching the items, as everybody has mentioned, but a way in which you could just kind of get a glimpse of, well, what could zines look like, how simple could they be, how easily kind of produced, or obviously kind of the origins of zines being really easily replicated and distributed. So that was really a nice thing to be able to use, and we kind of got their permission to use it in any of our teaching. And other things just to quickly mention on here. So we had various links that we mentioned in the session, and kind of we added to those as people recommended things in each of our workshops. And then all these other images are screenshots of the zines that people made in all of the workshops. So we ran, as I say, several workshops within that Block Zero period last October, but then the session plan and the slides have also been used in lots of different ways. So we've done it, used it in embedded program teaching with a media production course. Colleagues have run it as a staff development hour within our department. Our peer-assisted learning team have used it with their PAL leaders, etc. So it's a really kind of, it's been a really flexible and reusable presentation, essentially. And we've had a lot of good feedback from attendees about how much they've enjoyed the session. So I think that is me, and I'm going to hand over to Ludo and Sarah now, and maximize my screen. And yeah, hand over to Ludo.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Morena. Sarah, do please intervene if there is anything else you would like to add.
Okay.
So, so what we, Sarah and I did a couple of workshops for 2 MA programs where we were asked to deliver a critical and reflective writing workshop. And we did that the year before, and they worked pretty well. But after attending that zine workshop, we thought, well, why can't we maybe make them do a zine and use that as a tool to reflect on what they've learned during our workshop? And there are people who like making things. So one of the MAs was our multidisciplinary printmaking. So obviously they are keen to make some form of books or zines. And the other one was for our MA curating. And basically, that's what we did. We asked them in advance to watch the video that Morena has just shown you. So they were prepared and could actually have the template ready for them to use. And then we use the last 15 minutes of the workshop to ask them to answer the 3 questions in whatever way they wanted to do it. So basically, we mentioned specific reflective writing cycle, so with a what, so what, and now what. And we asked them just to reflect, and the feedback was really positive. I think they really enjoyed having that really dedicated time to pause and reflect on what they did in the workshop, but also having to do something, not just to fill in a survey, but actually doing something that maybe they can come back to at a later stage. So while they were doing one, I actually did one myself, and it was really useful. It was a way for me to reflect on how the workshop went. And actually, I found again my zine. I was looking for it, and I thought I lost it, but I found it. I'm not going to share it because it's a bit not that exciting, but it was useful because I could highlight a few things that I thought worked really well or didn't. And we had an exercise related to critical thinking, and we were not sure how it would work, and it did work really well. What didn't work so well, I guess, is timing. And I'm sure I'm a victim of that now, but basically time flies, as we all know. But yeah, it was a really good way to use to make students reflect while doing something creative. Would you like to add anything else, Sarah?
No, that's fine, and you're fine for time, actually, Ludo. So
okay. Well, I'm not sure what else we can add to that, but it was, yeah, I think it's an easy thing to do. It would be great to do it in a classroom, next year. I think it will be even better because we could maybe share a bit more widely or see what people have done. But yeah, it was really a useful tool to pause and reflect, and not having to use Microsoft Form to ask them for feedback, basically. So I think that's probably all we wanted to say, Sarah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
So Morena,
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing that now, and then maybe so that is the end of our presentations.